Hello and welcome to Table Talk, a show where I chat with other creators in the TTRPG space about how they run their tables. I'm Danger Dan Jers, the GM and host of D&Dark, and joining us at the table today is the DM of the actual play podcast, Stories Told Again, Austin. Hello.
Hey man, it's good to be here.
So, for anybody less acquainted with your work, can you give us a little bit of background on your history in the TTRPG space and tell us about your show, Stories Told Again?
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of people know me as the Diabetic DM on TikTok. I've been in this space for a couple years now, but I've been playing for about a decade. My first foray into the AP world was through the show that I did called Found Familiars. With that, I played this little baby robot wizard named Tome. That was super fun. And when that show unfortunately ended, I took a year. I made some content on TikTok. And right now I am currently the producer and showrunner and GM of a show called Stories Told Again, which is this amazing story of essentially four weirdos who find each other and are just trying to survive in a world where effectively the bad guy won hundreds of years before any of them were born. It also features Deck of Many Things shenanigans, a possum wizard, evil clowns, death gods, and a lot of other pretty crazy concepts all wrapped into one, what I think is a really beautiful story.
A classic. As a fellow GM, host, and producer, my hat's off to you for wearing many hats. Do you also edit the show, or do you have a separate editor?
So it's a pretty small cast and crew. A lot of people are doing double duty. Rain Eldridge, our resident artificer, is the person who does our editing. And then we also have Tiffany Vaprinsky, who is our resident paladin, who does mastering and also a lot of composing for our show. So a lot of people wear many different hats. It's not just me.
I commend you for that. Our cast does each lend a hand in their own ways. Jordan, who plays the Wolfman, does all of our art and our social media. Everybody lends a hand here and there for things like episode transcripts. We're currently somewhere between 12 and 15% of our episodes are now transcribed.
Oh, that's excellent.
It is a monumental task and mountainous thing in front of us. So we've outsourced a little bit of that to some of our fans and patrons. So we're extremely grateful for them. It is, as I'm sure you know, a ton of work to run a show like these.
Oh, absolutely. I'm really, really lucky to have the cast and crew that I do, especially when it comes to a lot of the things that you're talking about where it's it feels like a mountain. Having people that are invested in the story, both as they are a fan of the show because they are in it, but also they are a fan of the show because they enjoy it, I think really helps with that level of creativity and finding that sort of balance between this is a show, but it's also a game that we're playing, you know?
Absolutely. That kind of investment is essential in long-term sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, comparing and contrasting some of your experiences, having been a player on the show Found Familiars and then hosting your own show, what has that kind of been like for you being on both sides of that equation, and how has learning from one influenced the other?
Well, I like to say that Found Familiars was definitely a learning experience for me. I've really tried to integrate the lessons that I learned from that game and that show into the one that I'm doing now. I think the main thing I learned about when I was creating Found Familiars was in sort of communication. That was when I sort of came up with the phrase of TTRPGs are not just a game, they are a conversation. And when communication begins to break down, so does the game and the story that everybody's telling, which is always really terrible. There were a lot of things that we integrated into that show that I think we could have put in earlier that would have helped. So when I started my show, I decided to put them in from the very first day. That also included when I was first finding my cast, I found people that I communicated incredibly well with. Tiffany, again, my mastering and composer and also a player of mine, was a very good friend of mine that I actually introduced to tabletop role-playing games because we were actually working together, and just out of nowhere, a couple people from my lab, I'm a scientist in real life, but they came to me and asked me to do this. And from there, we sort of figured out what her own playstyle is and the best way for us to communicate with each other. Same thing with Rain, my editor. We were actually friends in college, and we took this college acting class together where we did this scene where we were playing cowboys arguing, but we did it like we were characters in Seinfeld. So I knew that we already had that like that ability to communicate with each other and just have that sort of like comedic background and like really being able to like play off of each other's energy that I found really, really positive and something I wanted to bring to my game.
That's awesome. And I really love that TTRPGs are a conversation. It makes me think of, for our own show, D&Dark, for our first 5 episodes, we had a character that we had intended to stick around long term, but the actor who was playing her had a whole bunch of schedule conflicts, and so we just kept increasingly running into different scheduling barriers there. And we chatted about it for a while and ultimately decided to transition the character, splitting away from the group, and return as a recurring guest character rather than a full-time cast, just to better accommodate everybody's schedules. And it was a little bit rough at first, but ultimately that ended up working out really well for us. So that kind of open communication can be really make or break for a campaign, especially a like larger scale, longer term one.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that comes down to like the central like ethos of what D&D is and what makes it so fun is how am I able to best accommodate my players and how am I able to make it something that is creatively rewarding to everyone at the table. And it sounds like you did an excellent job of finding a way to accomplish that without really upsetting anyone or hurting anyone's feelings. So I commend you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It was a tricky situation, but I'm ultimately happy where we landed with it, and it seemed like in the long run it worked out really well for everybody. To that same extent, in that conversation with the people at the table, how much does that influence your world building when you're creating the campaign itself narratively? I just want to like take a peek into your world building process. Do you tend to fit the characters into the pre-established world, or do you build the world around the characters, or is it kind of like a chicken egg situation where it's a little bit of both?
So first, I'm going to start with a weird life hack when it comes to world building that I didn't realize needed to be said until I met people who did not realize this, which is you should be asking your players what kind of stories they like to tell.
Absolutely.
That should just be your first step. Because like my first style of world building, I literally called man plans and God laughs when I first started, because it was like I would come up with this idea and then I would have these people who are like brilliant storytellers who are coming in and being like, I want to tell this kind of story. And I'm like, that does not fit in my world, but it's more interesting. So let me recreate everything that I do. So I kind of developed this new idea when it comes to world building, which is where I sort of come up with like a central theme or concept that I give to my players about the world, which could be like a question or a technology, literally anything. And then I just immediately stop from there and I wait. I usually from there go very, very in depth with my players about the character that they're creating, but also to know about who they are personally. In my session zeros and during the character creation process, I send out this massive personalized questionnaire based around my relationship with that person and the things that I know that they respond well to. Like one of my characters, they usually play characters who admittedly are kind of like petty. And I decided to lean into that by one of the things that I asked them was, there's a person where you're from that everyone loves, but you know different. Why is that and who are they? And I swear I was given 4 pages of backstory for this NPC that I had never even considered for this person's like character and like overall arc that ended up becoming like, I would say, a pretty major villain for my entire campaign that honestly hasn't even shown up yet. But by the way, spoiler warning for Stories Told Again in there. But with that, I also like go into personal concepts as well. Like, what are people's favorite movies? What were your favorite books growing up? Like just things that I can find where I have like a laundry list of different inspirations that like I can work with if I ever get lost, or at the very least to find things I can then integrate into the world that I know that they will respond well to.
That is a great way to approach it, and I feel kind of similarly. My approach for D&Dark, granted, D&Dark is kind of its own beast. It's a gothic horror campaign that is set in a fictional version of real-world London, starring all of the classic Universal monsters. Since the world kind of starts from them, everything is built around them, and it's a constant back and forth of them keeping me on my toes and me keeping them on their toes. But going off of your thing about pulling from the types of stories that your players relate to, a thing that one of my players at the table, Jordan, who plays the Wolfman, she was DMing for me a Tyranny of Dragons campaign. And a thing that she noticed a good chunk of the way through was she could really quickly pinpoint and figure out for the players at the table what kinds of things they would respond to and what kind of behaviors they would tend to have once she realized that it lined up almost exactly with what types of video games does this person like to play.
That's so cool.
And that seems to have been pretty reliable. Now, we have still kept in conversation and done a lot of the post-session stars and wishes kinds of things. So getting that direct feedback from the players is important, but she could pretty quickly clue in by seeing that, okay, this person loves to play Souls-like games, so if I really challenge them with a dark and gritty thing that pushes them through the mechanics, then they're having a great time. This person likes more casual games, so I'm going to try to loop them into more of the rules-light, role-play-heavy side of things, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I'm a big puzzle person, so anytime she could put a problem in front of me to try to solve is when I would really lock in and engage.
Oh, I love puzzle games. I just played Inscription for the first time.
That's a fun one.
It was so up my alley, literally every aspect of it.
I'm not super big on deck builders in general, but that one really managed to hook me and pull me in just because it's such a unique and interesting premise, and the more puzzly and metatextual aspect of it really scratched that itch for me.
Absolutely. Oh, hey, also, there's one more small piece of advice I'd like to give about world building, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Don't get too attached to the world that you're creating, because your players are inevitably going to blow it up.
Uh-huh.
That is literally every point of the development process. My show, the pilot, 3 hours before we were set to shoot, one of my players was like, oh, hey, just so you know, I've decided that my character is actually from this underwater city with a glass ceiling that is super far away from everyone else. And I had already planned for every single one of them to be in a starting town and kind of know each other. And I had to completely basically explode my entire pilot. But I think that it created something that was so much more fascinating. And I feel like if I got too attached to that and said no to my player in that moment, it would have been less narratively cool, and it would have made for a less fascinating world.
For that exact reason, when planning out and prepping for D&Dark, I intentionally only planned out half of the campaign, because I knew by the time I got there, I would have absolutely no idea what the state of the world would be in because of my players' actions. So it would be dangerous to plot out any further than that.
Oh, that's really smart.
But from a similar perspective, the general philosophy that I tend to take when it comes to world building is I tend to think very villain-centric, because those are the aspects that are within my control. Since those are the characters that I'm piloting, I know what they are planning and what they are going to do. And it's a riff on some advice I heard a while back that I was kind of doing anyway, but it really solidified hearing it as an actual concrete bit of advice, was planning out what does the world look like if the party does not exist.
Ooh, that's really neat.
And then building out from there. So assuming that the villain's plan goes flawlessly, what does that sequence of events look like? What is it that they are trying to achieve? What happens if they win? So then the party being added into the mix, everything spirals and iterates out from there, and everyone has to adjust and adapt on the fly around the decisions of the party.
Have you ever played a Powered by the Apocalypse system?
I haven't, but I've been looking into them.
They have this thing. It's called the clock. system. And it's like basically like to midnight. And it's basically how many steps does the villain need to accomplish to achieve their goal? I feel like you'd really like that system.
It's one that I was looking into a bunch of different stuff for our season 2, which I'll go ahead and lightly tease here. We are like 95% locked into doing Pathfinder for our second season, but I was looking into the Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. I was looking into Monster of the Week. I was looking into there's a couple of other systems that I was toying with jumping into. Pathfinder ended up being the one that felt the most easy to adjust to. That was definitely one that I was looking into. Between that and Monster of the Week, there are two that I do eventually want to toy around with. So, like, kind of jumping off from there, what systems have you toyed around with, and what ones are on your bucket list of systems that you want to try?
So I took a very non-traditional route when it came to starting with TTRPGs. My first game, I was 18 years old, and I played in a Call of Cthulhu campaign in college for a few months. And I wasn't really getting it until I started like listening to the Adventure Zone, specifically like with the McElroys. And then I kind of realized, oh, this is what this could be. And from there, I've moved into so many other systems. I've played Powered by the Apocalypse. I've also played Pathfinder. I do play a lot of 5e. I also like a lot of like one-page TTRPGs as well. I try to play as many of those as possible. There's actually this book. It's called Tiny Tome. It is 51-page TTRPGs that you can play that are like usually very, very little prep that I've found to be very rewarding to play. But there's also like plenty of other systems that I want to play on my show. Without giving too much away, one of my players is planning on looking at like a Regency era game. We've literally talked about everything from like Vampire the Masquerade to Blades in the Dark to like this 2-page TTRPG we found called The World is Ending and We Are Very Large Dogs. Sentai and Sensibility. I actually...
Wait, Sentai and Sensibility?
Yeah, literally Sentai and Sensibility. It's Power Rangers meets Jane Austen. And it looks amazing, and I'm so excited to like actually like sink my teeth into it.
That sounds wonderful. I need to send that to Daniel, who plays the Mummy. He is a hoarder of systems, and that sounds right up his alley.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very much a hoarder of systems too. My Google Drive right now is almost like 90% full, and all of it is just because that's where I like keep all of my TTRPGs that I'm planning on playing.
I can relate to that. We've got a laundry list of stuff on our back burner, and we like doing in between the show interstitial bonus content. Some of it exclusive to our patrons, others just to release out and keep us busy in between stuff. But we've toyed around with a few of them, and we've got plenty that are on the docket to take a look at. We just did a Kids on Bikes one that I'm really excited about. But we did that. We did the Alien TTRPG. We did Pathfinder. We did a Call of Cthulhu. I'm wanting to do a Dread game sometime soon. We're also off mic just for like personal stuff. We're testing out a concept of playing. Are you familiar with the indie TTRPG Inc?
I'm not, actually.
It's a TTRPG that takes place in Purgatory, where you are playing a party that has died. It's structured kind of like a Souls-like game, where you're trying to reach different waypoints. Basically, you're making your way through beacons, you're fighting manifestations of darkness that are like aspects of negative energy that are trying to stop you from moving on. And the game ends with your characters passing on into the afterlife after dealing with their collective trauma, that the stronger that they get within Purgatory, the harder it is for them to move on, because their power is directly related to their baggage.
That's so fascinating. I love that.
It's a super fun concept, and it's Jordan's idea. She wanted to try out, what if we played a 10 Candles game that led directly into Ink?
Ooh. Yeah, that sounds so cool. I love mixing systems like that.
So for the listeners, for anyone unfamiliar, 10 Candles is a role-playing game that the entire party dies by the end of the story, no matter what. It is like a horror tragedy kind of story setup. So Jordan had the idea of, what if we played a 10 Candles game to generate a party of characters that have passed and then port those characters into ink.
I absolutely love that. That is such a fascinating concept.
It's one that I'm pretty excited about. She's extremely excited about. And depending on how that goes, that might be something that I push her to do as bonus content for D&Dark.
Yeah, I very much feel like playing new systems for bonus content. We just played Do or Do Not, which is like this feels like low impact, but it went to some like very, very crazy places. It's literally like you flip a coin and it determines on whether or not you can like do a step to accomplish a task. But last time that we played, it was literally like go grocery shopping, and we ended up in a serial killer's basement within like 20 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's an escalation.
Yeah, we did that. We also did The Cunning Folk by Emily Graymore. That was such a fun system as well. It's much more like based around mischief more than anything else. Like if you just want to play like what I like to call an I'm Just a Little Guy game that evolves from there. And it's cathartic, I think is a good way to put it.
That's fun. We recently did, in collaboration with the show Dread and Breakfast, I personally was not a part of it, but a good chunk of our cast collaborated with a couple of their cast to do a Goblinville game. And that is the epitome of a just a little guy chaos fantasy.
Yeah, well, if you have any experience listening to me on Found Familiars, I very much enjoy playing a little guy. So
they're some of the most fun characters to play in between playing the Machiavellian schemers and like the big powerful entities are just the little weirdos. Igor and Count Orlok are my two favorite characters to play. Anytime that they come up, I have a blast playing them.
Oh, that's so fun. Right now, my favorite little guy, her name is Paya. She's a possum in a wizard hat who runs an item shop that sells magical trash. And she can't speak at all. Identify doesn't work on any of her items. And she doesn't take money at all. You have to trade her something for it. But it creates these like beautifully chaotic things of like, how do I communicate with a creature? And somehow it works really well in audio format too.
That's fun. I'm assuming Paya is an acronym for possum in a hat.
It is. That is it. Yeah. Yeah. Not a lot of people have gotten that, which honestly makes it more fun.
So jumping back and like taking focus back to stories told again, what would you consider to be a good jumping on point for any listeners wanting to check out your show? Would you consider them starting at the beginning? Is there like any particular standout episode that you think is a really strong representation? What would you recommend for anyone wanting to check out your show?
So when it comes to what I would consider to be the best on-ramp for my show, I would strongly suggest basically starting from the beginning. I go very in-depth to show what the four players' lives are like. And I have had a lot of responses from people that have said, like, this helps me feel like I know the person as a friend outside of the party. And I feel like it makes it a much more personal story to start and just make sure every single person has their big spotlight at the very beginning. But like if you're considering like what I consider the best representation of our show, there is an episode, I think it's episode 7, called Of Clowns and Consequences. That is also something that I really like. I think it is the best representation of what our show is because it is absolutely ridiculous. Slight spoiler, but it involves the players going around looking for rocks, and it eventually results in a chase with an evil clown throughout the starting town. And throughout all of that, there's also like this insane level of like hijinks. Like one of my players explodes something in their face so hard that they were 1 point away from like fully dying. And at the same time, there's also this like intense level of drama that I also really like to put into my games based around like one of my characters not trusting another person. There were death gods at that time. It felt like a very, very good convergence of the things that were already sort of occurring in episode 1. That was the episode that I felt had some of the best payoff for those things.
Well, I'm definitely hearing both clowns and consequences.
There were a lot of both. But I will say that also, like, at the time of recording, 9 episodes have been out. And I will say that, like, episode 9 I would consider to be our strongest episode, both in terms of like editing and mastering, the music that's put into it. A lot of it is original music based off of our characters. You can see that like the role playing is improving. Something I really like about this, especially like when it comes to like creating a show and watching it develop over time, is that you can see them finding their own voice and finding like that rhythm. And I really feel like it's been present for a while, but this most recent episode, it feels like they're starting to like, we're speaking our language, but we're doing it more fluently. And I feel like it's only getting better every episode, you know?
Absolutely. I feel like with most actual play shows, it usually takes a little bit for everyone to kind of find their footing and settle into what the identity of the show is. It's certainly the way with D&Dark. A lot of that is just kind of us learning the ropes in real time and figuring out the intricacies and nuances of our characters. It always does take a second to click, and it's better that it get better with time than worse with time.
I definitely agree with that.
So, going forward, is there anything that you want to explore, either within your show or within any bonus interstitial content, other one-off games? Is there anything that is calling out to you as a story that you want to tell or an idea you want to explore in the future?
In terms of genre, I think that I am really flush with choice in my current game, just because each of my 4 players have very different tones in the games that they're playing. A very common joke that you'll hear on my show is that Luce, our cleric, played by the wonderful Took, I guess, their story is a horror story while everyone else is playing like a traditional fantasy adventure. So I very much like, I think that when it comes to genre, I can play with that now and really be able to explore that. But I definitely have ideas for like new campaigns that I'm working on running in the future. Some of which, by the way, I'm hoping to make charity one-shots as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm a scientist at Boston Children's Hospital for my day job. And I would really like to do a one-shot where it's actually a bunch of different people who are scientists in the TTRPG space playing specifically a pirate campaign. A lot of it is because like there is a lot of wonderful work that people do there, and me being able to give any kind of support means the world to me, both on like a personal and professional level, but also because I really like the pun of STEM to stern. I am planning on other campaigns already, both for my show and just in my personal life. The next campaign I'm planning to do is actually probably going to be a little bit shorter and a little bit more genre focused. It's this idea I've had for a while. Do you know what a cannonball run is?
I do not. Please explain.
So it's this idea of someone taking a car in New York and seeing how fast they can get to the other side of the country. I think the world record, is like a little bit less than 24 hours. I want to do that in Mordor.
Okay.
Specifically, like getting from the Shire to Mordor and making it like a racing TTRPG specifically.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Just to kind of like pick your brain on that a little bit more, what kinds of obstacles are you thinking of putting in their place? Are you thinking of like sticking pretty strictly to Lord of the Rings lore, or like just anything and everything that might slow them down?
Well, first off, it's definitely not going to be in Lord of the Rings. I do not want to get sued, but I'm definitely planning on using aspects of like the hero's journey and like traditional fantasy to kind of create like a map of what the track would necessarily look like, because I feel like that will also give my players a lot of different choices. Like if they're going from A to B, they can choose if they're going like through the mountain, over the mountain, or like through the swamp next to the mountain. And I would really like to integrate this with both like some sort of driving mechanic that exists in another system, and then integrate that into D&D. A lot of it is just because like I have ideas on how to use magic items in D&D as like effectively like Mad Max weapons. Like a chain of returning attached to an immovable rod makes like an immediate wall that no vehicle can go over. And I think, especially because like I have an artificer in my party right now, I just want to see how hog wild they can go with it, you know?
I have always wanted to do a wacky races type adventure and setup. I grew up loving the classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and that one is like a staple tentpole for me. So whatever kinds of wacky race car hijinks you can come up with. The more cartoony, the better.
I'll make an NPC fantasy Muttley for you.
Excellent.
Just for that.
So that more or less covers most of the questions that I had for you. Do you have any other miscellaneous things that you want to add?
I'd like to give a word of advice that was given to me that my show literally would not exist without it, if that's okay.
Oh, please do.
When Found Familiars ended, I was pretty upset. It was a huge part of my life, and it ended rather suddenly. But I ended up speaking to a friend of mine, Patrick Perini, over at Unbalanced Encounters, and he gave me this wonderful piece of advice that literally is the whole reason I put myself out there again, which is never be afraid to ask people if they want to do something with you, because you're never going to know how excited someone will be until after you ask them. It led to the decision for me to put myself out there again, where I was able to get the cast that I have. I was able to make the friends that I have, as well as the connections that I've made, including, I would say, the one I made with you. We met because I randomly messaged you out of nowhere. I was like, hey, if you would like to collaborate on something, I would love to do so. And it led to this.
Yeah, and this was a great conversation. So I'm very glad that you did reach out and that we could chat like this. Yeah, that is fantastic advice.
Thank you.
It cuts to the core of a lot of performance art type stuff. I've got a bit of an improv background, and that's one of the fundamental things that I was taught was the importance of willingness to take risks. No matter how perfect something is in your head, if you don't make it real, the story that's in your head is infinitely less valuable than the imperfect draft that you put on paper. So being willing to take that step to reach out and do things with your friends, start your communities, and do these kinds of projects is so essential and so vital. So that is phenomenal advice.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Well, before we wrap up, can you remind us one more time where we can find your show and where we can find you?
So I'm on TikTok at Austin the Diabetic DM or at Austin B15, B like the animal. My show is also out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. You can also find us on Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram by searching Stories Told Again.
All right. Well, thank you so much. All of those links will be in the description. And thank you one more time for coming to chat with me.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.
One more time, everyone. This has been Austin from Stories Told Again. I have been Danger Dan Jers, and this has been Table Talk. And I hope you enjoyed what we brought to the table. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Table Talk, created, hosted, and edited by myself, Danger Dan Jers, with artwork by Jordan Nelson. Our guest this episode was Austin from Stories Told Again. Links to his work can be found in the episode description. If you're interested in being a guest on this show, reach out to us at DnDarkPodcast@gmail.com. Our theme song and outro was created by Jeremy Vellucci. Check out more of his works on Instagram at JeremyVellucci_Wreck of Time. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time we have a guest take a seat at the table.